Hello and welcome along to the video. In this one I'll be doing a little checkup on some compost that has been in the lower half of this second-hand compost bin for 6 months, and you can see that my lack of resources extend to a door for said compost bin. So I've just put pieces of wood in there. Seems to have done the trick up until now. Getting them back in might be the issue. So the lower half of this compost bin, the contents of which is about 6 months old, whereas the upper half is more recent additions. And you might be thinking, is that safe to do? Is that okay? Are you turning it? No, is the answer to the turning question. No, I'm not turning it. Reason being, it's such a small amount, relatively speaking, that it doesn't really require turning. If I had something a little more extensive, well then I'm sure turning would be required, but not in this instance. I do have lots of pieces of wood and sticks in there, quite large pieces. The reason being is to keep the airflow, keep it aerated basically, to avoid it becoming anaerobic, which we don't want. That's lack of oxygen and things get messy and smelly, and you'd know right away probably if it was anaerobic. It would smell pretty bad, like a stagnant water, sulfury sort of a smell to it. But I've a good mix. That's all you need, a good mix of brown and green. Brown being your carbon, green being your nitrogen. It's normally sort of goes by the color. You know, green things are nitrogen and brown woody things are generally carbon additions. Well, except for something like coffee grinds, for example, which are dark brown in color, but they're actually a green addition to your compost bin or pile. Or this one is second-hand compost bin. Last year I was using old compost bags, commercially bought compost bags, piercing a bunch of holes all up and down the sides and underneath, and then just filling those up with waste materials. Or waste is not really a good term for my future composting materials, or compost as they say across the pond. That pond being the Atlantic Ocean, not the Irish Sea. Our American friends say compost, I believe. Our British friends, it's just compost. That's fine, no matter what you call it, it's the same beautiful thing. Black gold, right? Black gold. That good mix though is the most important thing anyway. And if you haven't got access obviously to a lot of materials, there's hedge clippings can do, the leaves, fallen leaves during the fall, the autumn, grass clippings. Maybe you have a lawn, which you shouldn't. Maybe your neighbor does, but I would just a word of warning about grass clippings in compost piles or bins or bags or whatever you're doing. Very thin layers of grass followed by brown and then another thin layer of grass, otherwise it become really wet and disgusting, and will inhibit the little critters and microorganisms. They're doing their job of turning it into compost. So just be mindful of grass clippings. It's very tempting to just throw in a big old bunch of them, but that's going to lead you to nightmare town. So to avoid any negative outcomes, I would mix it in well. Very thin layers of grass. So this is a riddle. Shouts out to Karen. Shouts out to Karen's dad. Shouts out to Karen's brother. Previously used on archaeological digs. Now it's being used to sieve compost. Reduce, reuse, recycle. Like and subscribe. So this riddle is a good size, I think, for sieving things, but it wouldn't. This compost, the resulting compost, not ideal for sowing seeds. It wouldn't be as fine as you would like for seed sowing. It can be done, definitely can be done. It is possible, but not ideal. And even some of the chunkier bits I would use for mulching around plants at this time of year. Plants that I have at this time of year are very few and far between, but I do have some brassicas, namely Brussels sprouts and kales. And the larger pieces would be fine to put around there to act as a kind of a mulch. But in terms of seed sown, this is not quite as fine as you'd like, but it is possible. You'll see at the end there's very thin taper-like pieces of wood and whatever in it, you know. And those larger pieces I'm putting aside, they'll go back into the compost bin for future compost. And only the bottom half of this compost bin is being used. I'm gonna only take a quarter of the contents out, so like half the bottom half, if that makes sense. It is starting to rain here as well at this point, so not ideal to have a pile of compost out and working on that in the rain, but it is Ireland, so rain can always be expected, even if it's not forecast. So round motions is what I'm doing with the riddle, or the sieve, whatever you want to call it. And I kind of turn it around every now and then. If the compost was really moist, it would have trouble. It would be clogging up the sieve. But thankfully, the moisture level in this is pretty good. I've taken the lid off every now and then, let a bit of rain in, let a bit of air in, and any critters that may have got caught in there and want to escape, that gives them an opportunity to do so. But overall, I'm very happy with this. Yeah, nice colour as well, dark, and you know, there's a smell compost has when you know it's good. Also a smell when you know it's anaerobic. Thankfully I didn't get that wafting out as I removed the pieces of wood, the makeshift door. Oh, a view from above. Yeah, the colour is great. Black gold, as they say. Yeah, the darker the soil, the compost is generally, it's a good sign. There's a good humus content and good carbon content as well. But again, a mix is key, like a good mix is key. It reminds me, in fact, of black soils. Some of the most fertile soils we have on our planet. Found in parts of India and China. I think Canada has some too, but primarily in Russia and Ukraine, the breadbasket of Europe. Much love to my Ukrainian brothers and sisters. That was a random bit of plastic there. That shouldn't have found its way in, but I know where it came from, so we're alright. And that is something with homemade compost, is you have that control, you know what's in there. And through the whole process of the compost being created, you can kind of keep track of what's in there. And like as you saw there, a little bit of plastic, which I know where it came from. The bottom of a box that I was growing carrots in. It's actually a part of the container that I took out for drainage, and then continued to use the piece of plastic for the bottom of pots again for drainage. Hopefully I haven't got too many microplastics in my system. But again, that question mark over commercially bought compost, and look, I buy it myself. You can never have enough compost. I could never make enough compost. So, I mean, that question mark about plastics and like what on earth has gone into this mix here, you don't know. Even if the companies involved say everything's 100% organic, and you know, a lot of companies say a lot of things. Yeah. Not to mention any companies by name, but there was one company indeed that very well known, small company, but you'd think like being a small company it'd be a bit more of a artisanal approach, and you know, things, you know, the right hand will know what the left hand is doing, and there'd be good oversight. But unfortunately I found a lot of kind of plastic, what would you call it, like frayed plastic, you know, like yeah, thin strips of plastic in it. So even those companies that proclaim that they're organic and so on, you know, at least when you make it yourself and it's filled up, your pile, your bags, your bins, whatever it may be, is filled up with stuff that you know, you're aware of where it came from, what it has come into contact with. It's a lot better approach if you can possibly do that. Not everybody has access to land or composting materials or whatever, you know. So, but there's always windowsills, people. I'm very grateful that I do have access to some land, but windowsills that's where I started with a chive plant. You know, you can get thyme and all sorts of herbs up into your windowsills, sprouting seeds, pea shoots. Yeah, a windowsill can be quite a bountiful place. Or it could just be devoid of anything. You can do that too. You do you, I do me, and together we live in harmony, alright? So, back to this composting situation. With the rain pittering and pattering. But yeah, I love the compost making process. As Ron Finley says, making compost gets my nipples hard. Shout out to Ron Finley, gangster gardener, big inspiration back in the day, and continues to be. Although I haven't seen much of him online recently. I have searched out some of his, I think it was the TED Talk he did back in the day, which was the first thing I saw, and then he may have been on Rogan and a few other things. Yeah, good, inspiring dude. Growing vegetables and flowers and all that good stuff in South Central LA of all places, and having some issues with the local government, I believe, along the way. But sure. And shouts out to Charles Dowding too, while I'm doing my shout out portion of the video. No dig growing. I try and approach things with a no dig mindset, but it's not always possible. And you know, certainly with my potatoes, my spud patches, constantly dug up with the earthing up or mounding up of the potatoes, and then the actual pulling the potatoes up. I have a video of said potato picking by hand back in August. I put that video up yesterday or 2 days ago. It's up on the channel. Check it out if you're interested. It's very chilled. There's no voiceovers or anything. It's just a chill potato harvest. A lazy potato harvest, one might say. So, yeah. The compost at the back of this bin is pretty well bed in there. But thankfully I do have those larger pieces of sticks and that to help the aeration process. If they weren't in there, that could cause some issues. But yeah, and it just means that when you come to sieving it, you're taking out larger pieces, a lot of which go back in. So, you know, realistically, there shouldn't be any waste in a garden, you know? Well, certainly in a garden that's taking permaculture principles, you know? Which, again, like the no-dig approach, it's in mind, you know? I feel like, I mean, if you're not trying to be organic, you're not attempting a no-dig approach, and you're not looking at things through a permaculture lens, then sure, you might as well just go down to your local supermarket and buy your vegetables, which is fine too. But you know, there's certain supermarkets, I must say, that the quality is, I mean, the stuff looks fine, looks great, you know, looks great, but then you taste it and it's not the same. Obvious things like tomatoes and fruiting vegetables are like a big thing, but most things I find, it's like the nutrient levels aren't in it either, you know. It looks the business, it looks great, you know, because they're selecting anything knobbly and not considered suitable for their shelves gets put aside, and only the things that people have come to expect to see are sitting on the shelves, waiting to be picked up, and in my opinion, undernourishing people. Because I don't think the same. Now, look, I'm sure studies have been done, and maybe I should have checked that before I made this video. But I would be pretty happily confident in saying that the quality of homegrown vegetables with an organic permaculture and no-dig approach, as much as is feasible, is way more nutritionally valuable and beneficial to you than the stuff that you'd pick up in your local supermarket. Just doesn't mean to say, again, don't go and buying vegetables from your local supermarket. Please do that. Eat vegetables, eat fruit, eat herbs. And I'm not a proselytizing vegetarian, you know, I'm not advocating veganism or anything like that. I eat meat. But I am aware that I'm a hypocrite. But anyway, back to the compost. There's plenty of time in the future for vegetable related rants and so on. Yeah, there's the rain starting to come down here now as well, so as I said, you don't want to be cut out in the rain with a compost pile exposed. But it is what it is, and it is the country that it is. Good old Ireland. And every other day it's raining. So sieving away, and it's quite a workout. People ask me if I go to the gym. I've never stepped foot in the gym. I go to the garden. Do a bit of sieving out in the garden. And your hunkers like that, sieving away. I'm telling you, one or two times and you're like, this is grand, be done in no time, but after a while the sweat starts pouring. But yeah, I wouldn't have it any other way. You know, it all ultimately is gone towards beautiful homemade compost. It's for beautiful homemade, homegrown rather, vegetables, and then homemade meals. You're learning so much as well. I mean, just in the act of sieving the compost, as long as you're not away with the fairies altogether, you're conscious of what you're doing. You'll just pick up things, you know, even if it's how to move the sieve as you're sieving, you know, circular motions, and then spinning it around like so. You see? Yeah, you always learn, you know what I mean? And if it's something that you're interested in, the learning sort of just comes because you're so engaged. So simple process of removing the compost from the compost bin and sieving it out, putting the bigger stuff aside, and then adding that back in, and then coming back to it at a later point and doing the same thing again. You might say, why record all of this? Well, it's sort of a warts and all approach. So, you know, this is what it is like for real, you know. There's a lot of glossy videos up on YouTube, and a lot of them I watch and appreciate. Charles Dowding, Hugh Richards, Buy Their Farms, all that good stuff. But yeah, I'm just an idiot with limited resources, so why not show how potentially boring it is? But as I say, once you're engaged, it's not a boring task at all. Yeah, there's always things to learn in the garden, and I'm a learner if nothing else. Goodness knows I've a lot to learn. I've been gardening for about 15 years, growing vegetables for about 15 years. I started with a chive plant. Shouts out to Mary, gifted me the chive plant. All the shout outs. Yeah, black gold, people. Yeah, that's churn. I'm gonna butcher this. Chernozem, I believe, something like that. Hit me up in the comments if I totally destroyed that pronunciation. Mollisol soils, I believe. Those dark soils, you know, the black soils that I mentioned earlier on. The colour of a soil in a compost is a good indicator, as is the smell, the texture. Yeah. Loose, but still with some moisture in terms of its texture. Dark brown, almost black with its colour, and fresh, like it's just the smell of compost is a little bit more difficult to explain. But you know it when you know it, and it's pleasant. It's quite pleasant. Maybe that pleasant feeling is more related to experience. Excuse me. More related to experience and down through the years, knowing what comes of it and how it's used and how beneficial it is. Or maybe there's some innate instinctive thing within humans that knows when our soil is good or bad. So sieving away still. I've about, I would say, 80 litres worth, so imagine 240-litre commercially bought bags of compost. That's kind of the amount that I'd have here. And as I've probably mentioned, you can never make enough, you can never have enough compost. So I do buy in commercially bought stuff, or commercially produced. And again, big question marks over that. But you gotta do what you gotta do sometimes. Yeah, so really, this is really rich stuff, you know, this very rich, perfectly fine for growing heavy feeders like tomatoes and courgettes, cucumbers in containers, or out in the ground too. With the addition of some farmyard manure, which I try and add in, particularly to those heavy feeders, and spuds would be another heavy feeder. Aubergines, eggplants. Eggplant. That's one that's confused me. I don't know where they get eggplant from, but maybe it's obvious. Look at the consistency of that. It's nice, really nice. And we get a close up at the end, of course. Yeah, there we go. Finito. So that's been the warts and all compost video. Like and subscribe, and see you in the next one.